So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Well, that message was about 2 hours or so ago. Let's get an update on the situation outside Capitol Hill with Gabriel Elizondo, who's there for us. Gabe, what's the scene like right now?
Well, security has been brought back to the Capitol building and the entire complex here. There have been busloads of National Guards troops that have been brought here in the last hour that have taken up position around the Capitol. There is also the Capitol Police that are here as well, securing the situation, as well as the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C. Everybody has been here now, and they're basically securing the Capitol because lawmakers, Congress people, representatives, and senators are planning to come back here to the Capitol this evening to get on with the Capitol's business. And what is that? That is the certification of the Electoral College votes that they were doing when all of this began, this tumultuous situation, and the Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, breached security, and got in those crazy scenes that we've been seeing throughout the evening here. But as of right now, 7 p.m. local time here in Washington, D.C., we are now 1 hour in to a citywide curfew, and I can report that the Capitol scene now,
Growth Fund. I'm just really
effectively
interested in
secured.
buying it.
What about the areas
Where are we
not far from the
going?
Capitol building? Some of the pictures that we've been
Growth
seeing
Fund.
are showing us riot police, what looks like riot police perhaps, still outside, in position it would seem. Do you have a sense of how many of the president's supporters are still out on the streets at this hour? An hour after the curfew was declared?
33,000, 2,000. Let's
It's
get
really
some
hard to say,
more
quite frankly,
iron.
but I can tell you that there were tens of thousands of Trump supporters that were here for the protest and for
More
the events
iron.
that they had throughout the day.
Hello with
And
the
once they
iron.
left the Capitol, those that came here anyway, they had to go somewhere, and they're either going back to their hotels or going back to wherever they came from. So there are certainly still a lot of people in this city, but for the most part, the streets appear to be quiet, but tense, very tense. And that's why you're still seeing images of lots of police on the streets, even outside the Capitol area, because, again, there is a curfew that is in effect, but it does not appear we see any sort of tumultuous situations or any sort of rioting or anything like that that we know of right now throughout the city. It's a very calm, tense mood throughout the nation's capital right now after this day that everybody is still trying to figure out what actually happened. And I will say that there will be a lot of discussions on how this was allowed to happen here at the Capitol building.
And one woman actually died, Gabe, which is, something really shocking. A woman who was injured died. Is there any more information about that and the other injuries that were sustained by some of the police inside the Capitol building, according to DC police?
That is a good point there, Foley. Yes, one woman, we believe that she was a Trump supporter, part of the protest that was one of the people that stormed the Capitol, was shot, wounded, and the Capitol Police, or the Metropolitan Police of D.C., did confirm just recently that she did sustain life-threatening injuries, and she did die at the hospital. There were several Capitol Police that have also been injured. The extent of their injury, we're not quite sure yet. There were some journalists as well that were injured when some journalists were right where we were, not too far from where I'm standing right here, during the tense moments, were attacked by some Trump supporters as well before many of the journalists had to take cover. So there were some injuries, but obviously the one death is now confirmed at this hour.
The House Speaker, Gabe, Nancy Pelosi, saying that they're hoping to resume their session later today once the building has been secured. Do you anticipate that will happen today, that they'll be able to resume their debate on certifying the election victory of Biden today?
If they want to, yes. And Nancy Pelosi has said she
We
is waiting
can
for the Justice
go
Department, for
to
the FBI, and for the Capitol Police to give her the okay that she can summons back the Congress people back here to the Capitol so they can carry on with their work throughout the evening as they had planned. What we're seeing here right now is an incredibly intense police presence here by federal and district officials. And what they are doing is they are securing the Capitol right now. As soon as they say it is secure enough for VIPs such as lawmakers to come back, we expect that they will start coming back. Many of them
You're so
were
dumb.
ushered out of here, of course, during the time when the security
So
was breached here at the
retarded.
Capitol. But based on what we're seeing, all is peaceful.
And retarded
Security has been
people
restored
doing
here at the
retarded
Capitol
things.
grounds. It's just a matter of the officials here giving the all clear for lawmakers to come back in.
Democratic lawmaker Chuck Schumer is saying at this hour, according to the wires and U.S. media reports, that they're planning to resume the electoral college count at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is about an hour from now. Gabe, I'll check in with you once again a little later. Earlier, I spoke to Democratic Congressman Adriano Espaillat. He was escorted to a secure location along with other members of Congress when President Trump's supporters forced their way into the building. Here's how the situation
Naughty
unfolded, according to
people.
him.
Bad
At the very beginning of
naughties.
the day, we saw people gathering, and unfortunately, not enough security around. But as the debate began, the process to validate the results of the Electoral College, the Trump protesters chose to interrupt the process and storm the Capitol building. And so we're here. The process will continue. This is a nation of laws with strong democratic institutions, and we will proceed with the process, and we will have a result and inauguration on January 20th.
With the
Riot police have
bonanza.
been deployed. The FBI has been deployed in Capitol grounds.
Bonanza.
And I'm beginning to see a disbursement of the folks that were out there, but there's still plenty of them. So I suspect that it will be a while before they are completely dispersed, and we'll be able to proceed with our proceedings. I think there's a greater resolve now more than ever to proceed with our constitutional duties as lawmakers, to abide by the rules established within the Constitution of the United States, and to protect and preserve our nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And many of the ones that showed up at the Capitol today were enemies of our democracy. We are supportive of democracy. We are supporters of dissent and protest, but we don't support violence. We don't support vandalism. We don't support assault or intimidation. And so we will proceed, and we will count those votes. I don't think that the folks that came here today are a reflection of the vast majority of the American people. I think that they are a small group, a small fringe group, violent, intolerant, perhaps racist at their core, that refuse to accept the reality that manifested itself last night in the state of Georgia or last November across these United States.
President-elect Joe Biden has described the chaos in Washington as a dark moment in the nation's history. Christine Salome is in Wilmington, Delaware, with more on Biden's reaction.
The president-elect was scheduled to make remarks. We were told they would have to do with the economy, with that important runoff race for Senate, control of the Senate at stake in Georgia. We expected some reaction to that. well as to the ongoing certification process of the Electoral College votes. What we got instead, 2 hours late, was a reaction to the chaos that was unfolding in the streets of Washington, D.C., with the president-elect calling the scene there an assault on democracy. He called the halls of Congress, where this was happening, the citadel of democracy. He talked about the people who were doing it. He said, this isn't a protest, this is an insurrection, and those who are taking part in it, he said, were extremists, and their actions he described as bordering on sedition.
7
After his remarks,
million.
Joe Biden was asked, is he afraid? Is he worried about his inauguration? He ignored most of the other questions, but he stopped to answer that one and said that he wasn't concerned about his own security. He wasn't concerned about the inauguration, that American people had had enough and American people would stand up. He said, enough is enough. And it will be quite a healing process moving forward that the president-elect will have to contend with when he takes office in just over a week.
All right, live pictures from Washington, D.C. once again, where, as you can see, police, security forces are still out on the streets an hour after the curfew came into effect to try and bring back calm to the nation's capital when President Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol building earlier. The president, as you'll recall, issued a statement on Twitter calling on his supporters to go home, but at the same time telling them that he understood them and that he loved them, that they were special. So mixed messages there. Now Twitter has said that future violations of its rules will lead to the permanent suspension of President Trump's account. So Twitter saying that the president's tweets today violated its rules, including its civic integrity or violent threats policies, and that if this continues, this will result in the permanent suspension of the real Donald Trump's account, the account of the U.S. President Donald Trump. Quite significant reaction there, a message from Twitter threatening to permanently suspend the account of President Donald Trump because of some of the messages he's been posting. Well, world leaders have responded with disbelief really to what's been happening in Washington, D.C. and the unrest on Capitol Hill. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson described the scenes as disgraceful, adding that the U.S. stands for democracy around the world and that it's now vital that there should be a peaceful and orderly transfer of power. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says Trump and his supporters must accept the decision of American voters at last and stop trampling on democracy. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg described the events as shocking and said the outcome of the U.S. election must be respected. Let's speak once again to PJ Crowley, a former State Department official, joining us once again on Al Jazeera with the breaking news coverage from Washington. Lots of reactions from world leaders, reaction that we would normally see from Washington, D.C. Before we talk about the international reaction, I want to get your thoughts on what happens in the next 14 days, PJ Crowley. There's still 14 days to go until Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th. And Donald Trump could still cause a lot of harm in those 14 days. What should be done?
Well, he should. I think it starts with what happens the next few hours. Obviously, leaders in both the House and the Senate do not want to feel intimidated or look intimidated by what happened earlier today, and they're going to try to resume their deliberation regarding the Electoral College. I'll be very curious to see how some of those who were willing to practice politics as usual and challenge the electoral result, knowing that it was not going to be successful. Does their tone change? Does their approach change? Do they signal a greater willingness to accept the result and signal both also to the president that this is now over? The process is completed and Joe Biden is in fact going to be the next president of the United States. So I think that signal will be important. And then I'll be interested to see, President Trump over the last 2 months has presented this fiction that the election was stolen. And yes, you're right. He can still do some some challenging things over the next 2 weeks.
Right.
I'm inclined to think that it may well be that he just simply recedes from view and will
But what
slink
if
out of
if
Washington.
he doesn't do that? I mean, some lawmakers, like Congressman Ocasio-Cortez, are talking about impeachment again. Others are talking about the 25th Amendment. Do you think that Trump should be kicked out of office?
Well, I think that if he truly believes that the election was stolen, he is in fact unfit, to continue in office. Impeachment is a very blunt instrument. I don't think the cabinet, unfortunately, will have the courage to exercise the 25th Amendment. So we just have to survive, the next 2 weeks. But Donald Trump will have to come to grips with the fact that there is no longer a process that can help him overturn the result. In fact, Biden is going to be president in 2 weeks.
We just have to survive the next 2 weeks, you say. It is quite astonishing to hear that. I mean, the United States is, of course, a beacon of democracy, has been seen as a beacon of democracy around the world. And today you have world leaders condemning what is happening in the United States, comparing this to coups that would happen in, what have been described as banana republics and so on. There's even, I'm looking at social media here and the satirical sites, The Onion, saying that Serbia wants to deploy troops to the U.S. I mean, it is quite incredible, isn't it, that we're witnessing all of this today. What does it say about American democracy? Is this the demise of American democracy?
Well, it is certainly, the institutions of democracy here in America are more fragile than we thought. We've lost some of the resilience that allowed us to have robust debates, but come together after difficult elections. But now you do have two parties that are being pulled in opposite directions, and we're going to have to recreate, if we can, a political center. That's where Joe Biden wants to operate. But I think it comes back to how do we react to what has happened. I think everyone is shocked and stunned, both here in this country and abroad, by what they've seen today. Now the question is, when the process does in fact reach its final conclusion, how much do we see more statesmanship, both by members of the president's own party on Capitol Hill, who have been enablers up to this point, from those around him, including in those that control law enforcement, the military, and so forth, that make it clear to the president that the kind of antics that we saw earlier today, where he literally encouraged his supporters to charge the Hill, where they now say, cease and desist. And this is what we're going to need if we're going to be able to recover from where we find ourselves at this moment.
The Turkish news agency Anadolu saying Turkey is inviting all parties in the U.S. to use moderation, common sense to overcome this domestic political crisis. It is quite a day when countries like Turkey or others even advise the U.S. on democratic principles. Countries like Russia also, the U.S. is perceived enemies. What will they be making of this? This is something that they could be taking advantage of, couldn't they?
Well, this to Vladimir Putin is yet another gift. Donald Trump has given him a great deal over the past 4 years. He intervened in the 2016 election at a relatively small amount and received a great deal of payback. So, Vladimir Putin doesn't have to actively undermine American democracy. We're doing it to ourselves. And I think this is what everyone has to take a step back and only recognize, we're in danger here, but understand what this means in terms of how the United States is presenting itself around the world. We've got a great deal of work to do. We're going to need statesmanship by both Republicans and Democrats, and we'll see if we're worthy of that effort.
A lot of world leaders, of course, were hoping for a return to some normalcy when Biden takes office in January 20th. A lot of them congratulated him. And he's, of course, promised to bring back the U.S. onto the world stage, bring it back into the multilateral system. But but there's so many things to deal with at home right now, so many domestic issues that he has to address. For one of them, the priority, I guess, being reuniting this deeply divided country today. Is there going to be time to really focus on what's happening outside?
Well, that is no question that we have to find a way to govern ourselves as we have in the past. If there's a silver lining, perhaps here, it is that we do exist at the moment in the midst of a global pandemic. That is also going to be the number one policy priority for the Biden administration. And the pandemic not only allows the government to show what it can do domestically, it encourages the United States to be more cooperative and supportive together with other countries around the world in helping to distribute and administer the vaccine to other populations, because we have to recognize that we're all in this together. We're not going to be safe until the world is safe. And so, there is a challenge as to whether we can make government more effective than it is at the moment. On the other hand, there's this opportunity, because everyone recognizes the crisis that we're in, that we can increase international cooperation, start to gain momentum on the COVID front, and that may help us in terms of showing that government can be successful when it has proper leadership.
PJ Crowley, so very good to talk to you today about all this. Thank you so much for making time for us and for being patient. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your insight.
You're quite welcome.
Now, earlier I also spoke to Richard Goodstein, who's a Democratic political consultant and former advisor to former President Bill Clinton, and here's his reaction to the situation today.
This is the worst attack on the United States since 9/11. But the terrorist today is Donald Trump, our president. He's a vile human being. The degree to which this is frightening is impossible to overstate. I mean, Americans would send inspectors, observers to foreign governments to look at elections. We will never be able to do that again with a straight face when our president is urging his supporters, armed supporters, to invade the U.S. Capitol to prevent him from being ousted. We know he knows the second that he's out of the White House, he's in very much legal jeopardy. I think that is probably one of the large explanations for why he has encouraged these people. But for the president of the United States to encourage this kind of attack on the symbol of the United States government, on one hand, it's horrifying. On the other hand, he sat by when the same thing happened in the state of Michigan months ago, and he almost rooted on the attackers there. So it is. I'm almost moved to tears. I don't want to do it because I don't want to embarrass myself on your air, but it's that frightening. I work in that building. I've worked around it for many years. The security is actually not as much as you'd think it would be, but the fact that we knew this rally was coming and that the security was as lax as it is pretty shocking.
Well, after President Trump posted that video earlier where he called on his supporters to go home, but at the same time was telling them that he understood them, that the election was stolen from them, well, Twitter removed the video, and it did for the same for several others of Trump's tweets throughout the day today. And now the social media platform has in fact decided to block the U.S. president's account for 12 hours. It's the first time that Twitter has placed a suspension on President Trump's account, and it's warned that if the president continues to violate its rules, it could permanently suspend his account. So Twitter has locked President Trump's account for 12 hours and has warned that he could get kicked off the social media site permanently. This is a statement issued by Twitter, once again locking President Trump's account for 12 hours and warning that he would be kicked off permanently if he continued to violate his rules. I also spoke to Derek Plummer earlier. He's a former director of African American Media Affairs for the Democratic National Committee, and he says that the actions of Trump's followers are disgraceful.
I protested on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol, peaceful protests. I've worked at the U.S. Capitol. I've worked at the Democratic National Committee, which is around the corner. I've never seen anything like this, and it is disgraceful. It is shameful what the President of the United States has fomented in the form of Donald Trump. He lost a fair and free election. He made it very clear that he was not going to go quietly into the night. And what we are seeing is what we see when we don't have rule of law and we don't have a functioning democracy. And what I would say is that what this moment shows us and tells us that democracy is so fragile. Even with the United States, it is fragile. And it depends upon people of goodwill doing the right thing. And we've said this, so many of us have said this for many years, that Donald Trump was morally inept. He was corrupt. He did not believe in our democracy, nor in the will of the people. And what we're seeing today is a very clear manifestation of that. And it's sad. And the reality is that having worked in the Capitol, having seen protests at the Capitol, peaceful protests at the Capitol before, the level of force that you would see from the Capitol Police, from the National Guard, is overwhelming. And this is not what you would see, what you're seeing today. There's no way that, let's be honest, if these were black protesters, they would have been able to storm the Capitol. We would have seen tear gas. We would have seen a whole bunch of different mechanisms being brought out. There are rumors that Speaker Pelosi and the mayor of D.C. have called on DOD to actually have the National Guard come in, and initial requests were rejected. I can't seek the veracity of that, but it's very, very troubling. It's very troubling what we're seeing right now.
So the latest live pictures that we're getting from Washington, D.C., where police are now out in full force. They've cleared most of President Trump's supporters who were out on the streets earlier, in front and outside the Capitol building. A curfew is now in effect. Media still on the streets there. There were attacks on the media earlier by President Trump's supporters. Their equipment's thrashed by President Trump's supporters, as you can see from these pictures earlier. A tense situation really unfolding in the nation's capital, in the U.S. Capitol, this Wednesday, January 6th, as the Congress was to certify the election victory of Joe Biden. Now, while this all was unfolding in D.C., the results of Georgia's Senate's runoff were announced, and Democrats narrowly won the two Senate races, giving the party control of both houses of Congress. The victories of Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff mean that Joe Biden can now push through his agenda in the Senate unchallenged. Natasha Gonem has more on the Senate races in Georgia from Atlanta.
Georgia Democrats are savoring this victory the most, with Reverend Raphael Warnock, the senior pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church behind me. He becomes Georgia's first black senator, and he becomes only the 11th black senator in U.S. history, with Jon Ossoff. He was recently declared the official winner in his race. At 33, he becomes the youngest member of the Senate since 1973. On the campaign trail, he talked about how he was a Jewish son of an immigrant. He is also the CEO of a documentary production company. They got right to the point. They said that that the incoming Senate needs economic relief to families who are struggling as a result of the pandemic. And the Senate also needs to get to work to pass a more appropriate, in their mind, response to COVID-19. So as you can see, these men are going to be hitting the ground running, already looking ahead at the dual crises facing the United States. Meanwhile, both of their Republican opponents have not officially conceded. They have said, however, that they will exhaust every resource necessary to ensure that all, this is a quote, legal votes are counted in Georgia. It's worth noting that it appears that Ossoff's victory in Georgia is large enough that a recount cannot be requested by his opponent, David Perdue.
A Democratic victory in Georgia, but it's been a day of social unrest and violence in the the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., where supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump are still out on the streets despite a curfew coming into effect. Earlier today, they stormed the Capitol building as politicians were about to certify the election victory of Joe Biden. The National Guard has now been called in and restored calm to the Capitol building, we understand. In the last hour, Twitter has locked President Trump out of his account for the first time. More on this and all the events unfolding in the U.S. in about 30 minutes from now on Al Jazeera. I hope you do stay with it.
Oh no. Oh no. How much iron stuff do I have?
Finland has set itself one of the world's most ambitious emission reduction targets, promising to go carbon neutral by 2035. With initiatives from nature conservation to greater investment in public transport and alternative energy, those plans could well be met, but only if the country also shuts down its peat industry, which has long been a source of both fossil fuel and jobs. So can the country's climate warriors get it done?
What is this pose? What is this dirty shit? This yuckiness. It's so yucky. Right, we're good.
Always nice to hear the truth, but I think it's
Iron.
know the truth. COVID
Iron.
is really a warning.
No.
It is a tremendous message to say stop, take stock, and come to your senses.
What are you
The
talking
kind of actions
about?
that we are doing on the planet are causing so much damage and so tremendous disruptions that we need to alter them very fast.
What a
As the
load
world
of
tries to
poo.
recover from COVID-19, Finland is on a carbon-cutting crusade, and it's refusing to let a pandemic stand in its way.
Oh,
Hasn't been
fantastic.
cancelled. The COVID-19 has learned us that yes, we can act together, and now it's really time to act together.
The most ambitious emission reduction targets in the world, and pledging to go carbon neutral by 2035. But to get there, it needs to confront a dirty secret and take on a fossil fuel that's worse than coal.
Ooh. Oh no.
Se raja tulee täällä oikealla, mutta mun mielestä tää on Tapion maita.
How
Finland is known as the
disgusting.
land of 1,000 lakes. But
That's
that's actually
sick.
an understatement. It's covered by over 180,000 lakes, rivers, and wetlands.
Well, isn't
Here in
that
Celsius,
shit?
water is at the heart of life.
Lake is very deep topic for Finnish people. Really at the center of our culture. Here in Karelia, fishing is the oldest way of life we know. I strongly believe that each lake has its own being and kind of a way of existence.